All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's session. This is part 3 of our Pivoting to New Realities series, and we'll be talking about distributed agile development. So, we all know this new and unexpected disruption is accelerating our need to think about how we work. How do we continue to meet these demands with highly distributed teams and work from home? Well, the answer is building strong communication through tooling, coordination, and transparency. So my name is Victoria, and I'm the marketing director here at Crosslake. I'll be helping to moderate today's session. Now, before we get started, there's just a couple nuts and bolts I'd like to get out of the way. If at any time you have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out via the questions feature. It's just located on the right toolbar. We'll do our very best to address questions as we go, and time permitting, we'll also open the floor for Q&A at the end. A recorded version of this webinar will also be made available via email together with a PDF of today's presentation. So no need to worry about screenshots and just focus on the content. To those of you just joining us, welcome. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our two speakers for the day, Kim Walters and Ernesto Custodio. Kim Walters is Crosslake's Managing Director. She has over 28 years of management experience in technology and engineering, including an amazing 18 years at Microsoft within engineering. She has proven expertise in developing a strategic vision and helping lead large teams to execute on the strategy using an agile and iterative approach. Ernesto Custodio is an agile transformation leader, and he has a successful track record. He's known for managing global projects, large-scale programs, and product teams to deliver outstanding customer value, as well as strategic objectives for startups, as well as Fortune 500 customers. In addition to what I can best describe as a never-ending list of agile certifications, quite literally, he has it all. If they have it, he has it. He also holds a PhD in effective distributed agile collaboration and information systems. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Kim, who can speak a little bit more about the frameworks and strategies we'll be covering today.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Victoria, and thank you for welcoming us here and joining us today. So today, like I said, I oversee kind of the organ process area. We'll talk a little bit about Crosslake, just if you're new to Crosslake, just to give you an intro about what we do here. And then we're going to go into kind of the process service overview, figuring out how we thrive in this type of crisis. We've already been doing this remote sessions. About 30% of our business is done remotely, so we're pretty efficient at that, and now 100% of our business has done that. So we're really helping to coach teams and make them even more efficient in this environment. And we'll give you some tricks and tips that we've done here that make life easier and more productive, and then also offer you a free consultancy too as well. So if you go to the next slide, that just gives you an overview of Crosslake. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is about 90% of our businesses come from private and growth equity companies, and their portfolio companies as well. So we are partners with you through this journey. What's great about the people, we have about 130 practitioners on staff, and they're global, worldwide. They have very similar backgrounds to me and Ernesto, been in the business for 20, 25 years. And what separates us apart from other agencies or other consulting businesses is that our practitioners they've been through these situations, they've been in the trenches, versus other companies that consultants that are still learning about tech. Our consultants have are practicing techs. Most situations they've dealt with. In my experience, like working at Microsoft over 18 years, I probably did every mistake in the book. So hopefully I'll learn from those mistakes and help you guys with some of those things, so you don't have to go down that road as well. So those are people. You had people that have been CPOs, Scrum Masters, Director of Architecture, Director of Quality, so very skilled folks. And then as far as our capabilities, what we do, we really help companies through the end-to-end life cycle. So everything from we help evaluate if you're going to buy a company, if you're a PE or portfolio company, or if you're just a company that wants to evaluate another company for a merger and acquisition. We do a lot of these things called tech due diligence, where we come and help give you a risk analysis of a company once they buy it. And then once you buy the company, it's really about where Ernesto and I come in. It's about value creation. It's about helping people with their agile processes, help people with organization, help people with architecture, modernization. So there's a whole host of services that we do and deliver. And again, we're coaching you guys and building skills with you. So our goal is not to just get in there and be a black box and then deliver something. It's about really working with your team. So once we leave your company and disengage, you guys are better off. You have the skills now to continue improving, doing your agile work, doing your scaled agile work, or what have you. So you guys can continue to get better. And then as far as the industries we work with, we have a lot of SMEs that have been from healthcare industries, financial opportunities, financial tech, education, transportation. So we really understand the different industries and the specific challenges, especially in this time. We're dealing with some healthcare companies right now that are just growing out of control because their business is exploding. And then we're dealing with some other companies that are looking at how do we cut costs, how do we increase productivity and reduce some of our costs. And then companies, like I said, we work with software, tech-enabled companies, private and public. And we work with really all size companies. We work with the mom and pop, 5-person teams sometimes, to, the really large companies that, have, 500 developers, 5,000 developers that are globally throughout the world. And now, on top of that, all have to work remote. So we've pretty much seen quite a bit, and it's great that we have that pool of resources, that 130 consultants that are very senior, that pretty much can align to most of the businesses out there. So that's kind of an introduction across. Like the other thing I'll just mention is that, please reach out to myself, Ernesto, Victoria afterwards. If you would like a one-on-one hour consultant with us, we will certainly willing to do that, just to understand your business a little bit better and understanding your challenges a little bit better. We're here to offer our services for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ernesto.
Great, thank you, Kim, for that. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay and the audio is okay. So in setting the stage for what we're going to talk about today, it's really about making this an opportunity. So Rahm Emanuel has a quote out that is somewhat popular now, and that is you will never want to let a crisis go to waste. The full explanation of that, or the full quote, is that you should make it an opportunity to do things that you think you couldn't do before, that you didn't think you can actually do. So to elevate your performance during a crisis. And that's going to be the theme here, because what we want is really not just to survive the crisis. We want to thrive through it. There's a significant number of studies now, all the way from Harvard Business Review to Forbes, reporting on the fact that organizations that make it out of the crisis by being proactive, by elevating their performance, by acting early and addressing their core challenges, are more likely to be dominant after the crisis than those that simply went through the crisis as they survived. So we want to talk about thriving, and in particular, how to thrive in a remote, agile environment, right? So in that content, there are two types of remote collaboration. And this is adapted from an educational set of studies that have been taking place in terms of, hey, what constitutes actual learning, actual service, actual engagement in a remote environment versus what is started to be called essentially the emergency remote learning, right? In this case, emergency remote collaboration. And what we're finding is that there are two types of collaborations, or two types of remote workers. Those that are in the surviving mode, which are temporary to get through the crisis, which are replacing just enough to get their face-to-face operation to work until they get back into the office. And it's essentially a get-by type of attitude or type of process, right? Where over time, as the crisis continues, there's a significant degradation in the performance, in the collaboration, in the productivity of these individuals, because that collaboration, that temporary aspect of it is elastic and eventually breaks. What we want instead is a more permanent adjustment to the new normal. So how do you identify a organization that is surviving through this? Well, they have temporary processes. their solutions and their processes are varying across different teams. So this team is practicing things in one manner, this other individual is practicing it another way. There's no cohesiveness. The staff that is participating in their online collaboration is somewhat limited. Only a portion of the organization is doing that, and it's not organizational cultural oriented. The risks that are associated with remote Agile and remote distribution aren't necessarily being measured, and they're not being addressed. And then there are the asynchronous communication, so we get misalignments out of those and so on, right? Sort of a reach out if you need help, here's a laptop type of attitude. On the flip side, where we want to be are organizations that are taking this end to end, that are looking at their full life cycle and are saying, hey, let's analyze our value stream and let's determine what is not working online and how do we optimize that so we have an optimal performance for our entire life cycle. This is a collaboration that includes all of the processes that are adapted to how we're working today and how we're going to be working possibly in the future. They are using consistent solutions. This is easier said than done, right? Many teams have been practicing Agile in one form or another in different ways because there's a fingerprint to how you apply this. Now we need to more than ever standardize some of those practices so that there are no variations that could potentially bite us when we're trying to coordinate in a long distance manner. And then we need to look at the risks associated with these. We're going to cover those in a little bit. And then finally, do we have the tools to optimize our collaboration? Are there tools in place? Are there individuals trained? And are we making the best use of those tools to maximize this opportunity? So those are the two differences between the two modes of operations that you might be in today. And we need to really, really think, hey, how can we get to the thriving part as opposed to getting by? And when we do that, there's several questions that help us kind of determine whether we're in that mindset or not. Starting from the bottom, the first thing is, how is our remote environment engaged today? How are remote teams engaged today? Are they really active? Are they being proactive? Or are they waiting for calls to come in and sort of, hey, we just bought ourselves another day, we're almost getting there. Does everyone have access to all of the necessary tools and resources necessary? A recent study from CrowdStrike showed that in the United States over the month of April, about 65% of the workforce was working remotely, right? This is the overall workforce, not just knowledge workers. And 53% of those individuals had not been giving any additional cybersecurity guidance for how to handle data in their home or in their environment. That's a significant risk. So we need to look at what has changed and how can we mitigate, but first of all, identify what those risks are so they don't bite us later, right? And then develop strength and capabilities that take competitiveness to another level when it comes to what others aren't doing. This is the Harvard Business Review study or article that I mentioned, where that is, hey, let's come out the gate earlier so that we actually have a competitive advantage here. And then how are the distributed teams realigning on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis? Our entire team sets actually aligning behind what they're creating. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay. Oh, just lost.
Oh no, we lost Ernesto. Oh, okay. We just lost your video, Ernesto.
Yeah, that was strange. Okay. I'll continue to share my audio and you still have the share. Is that right?
Yep, we can still see business plan.
Great. And then the last question, the most critical one, the one that's at the top of this, this ladder, is essentially the idea that we need to be more productive. We need to be able to do things better than we did them before. That's what every organization should be asking. How can we actually be more proactive than we were when we were at the office? Okay. So I'm going to pause here. I set the stage for what are the differences in how we might be thinking today and how we want to be thinking. But I want to take a quick pause for some of the aspects relating to what I mentioned. Any questions on that?
So far, no questions, but feel free to add your questions into the chat. There's just a little toolbar, and we'll be happy to answer your questions as we go along.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Victoria. I'm going to try to share my camera one more time and see where that goes, if it goes into the ceiling or if it, there we go. All right.
Perfect.
Beautiful. So for those of you that are experts in Agile, I apologize, but we need to level knowledge a bit for some of the attendees, so that we know what we're referring to when we say Agile, right? Agile is a method of developing products. Right? There's a set of values and principles that we follow when we do that. And under those values and principles, there are quite a number of frameworks. This is just a general representation of them. We're not going to go into them, but the idea that we've heard Scrum, we've heard XP, maybe we've heard Scrum at scale, maybe we've heard SAFe. These are all just flavors of the various frameworks under the Agile umbrella, right? The ones on the left, they're more for team collaboration, individual teams, right? How do we get those teams to produce value in an effective way? And then the ones on the right, they tend to address more of the scaling. How do we get multiple teams to work together, right? The challenge is that these frameworks are all silent to how we work in a remote environment. They were created with the mindset that teams are to work better together in a co-located environment where all of the practices are maximized for maximum value delivery. So we need to adjust some of these practices. We need to rethink how can we perhaps add elements that are necessary as the entire workforce now becomes a distributed workforce. Right? And some of those challenges range between the psychological aspect of the individuals not feeling connected. So there's a identity to being connected to the rest of the team that is lost over time. There's a degradation in communication. The morale overall as a result of those is actually impacted. There are problems in how we address our impediments. The actual problems that we have aren't being heard by the right people. So the reaction time to that is delayed, and we need to increase that, right? The knowledge that we acquire by just simply walking the hallways of our organization and talking to people, it's a lot. It's something that we tend to underestimate, right? So knowledge exclusion, when you're the only person in your room, I'm the only one in this home office right now, and I don't have that peripheral view into what others are working on and how we can partner together, that gets lost, right? The teams begin to misalign because if connecting well in a remote environment, I might be connected to my 5 other team members, for example, in a Scrum environment. Well, what about the other 5? What about the other 5? How are we coming together as an organization in a way that continues to align us? And because out of sight, out of mind, low communication, low morale, the trust level actually begins to drop. And with that come a slew of other side effects, right? And then the idea that we're not aligning behind a common goal, that purpose that drove us before starts to degrade. So these are significant aspects that over a long period of time begin to amplify more and more. We need to address these early, and we need to get the teams to have the opposite of this, which is to be very, very engaged and be productive and connected, right? The challenge with distributed Agile teams is that we tend to refer to them as a single thing, as a single composition. Oh, you're distributed. Well, there are actually a lot of flavors of it. And depending on which you might have different needs. If you have a co-located team, this is how you might have been practicing Agile before. The teams are all coming together in the office and they're discussing, and you have your stand-up. I just get up right now and have my stand-up. And if we're gonna do product backlog refinement, the product owner comes by and we start doing some of that, right? That doesn't happen as much in a distributed environment. But what if our 2 teams were separated, but yet co-located at both sides? Now we have a distributed team scenario. A lot of the material that I just covered applies, with the ability for us to connect remotely once in a while. we still have our connectivity, we still have identity to our teams, right? Then there is what we're experiencing today, and that is the distributed team members factor. This is 100% distribution. Everyone's dialed in. There's no mothership. So the idea that we would be able to talk to each other over our shoulders doesn't apply anymore. So we need to have different tools. We need to have different practices in addition to what we were doing before, or perhaps modify a little bit some of those practices. And then as we begin to come out of the crisis, as we begin to come back into the office, that's not going to happen all at once. Some countries might be opening up, some states might be opening up. Some might just decide to keep their workforce as distributed teams. That is going to lead to a lot of hybrid distribution. That's when there is an office where individuals are located in the office, but a few of the individuals from their remote environments are dialing in. I will tell you that, interestingly enough, the environment that works best outside of co-location is full distribution. And the reason for that is because everyone's on the same equal footing. There are no man or woman is left behind. We are actually working in an environment where individuals are agreeing and have the willingness to collaborate and putting the necessary tools and time into making that work. So it's an interesting proposition that when we're all distributed, we begin to have an opportunity for us to work better. Of course, nothing beats on-site, face-to-face. But second to that, this is probably the most conducive of the forms of distribution. In the past, that had been difficult. Today, we were sort of thrown into that. We were forced into it. The good news is that it can work. Okay. So how do we make this work? Well, there are two primary dimensions. There's the coordination, and there's the belonging factor, creating trust. And here's a list, here's a short list of the items that tend to have the most effect. There's a lot behind each of these, but each of them holds a separate dimension to allowing our teams to reach their maximum potential while remote in an agile environment or in an agile development environment. We need to have daily communication. That's already cooked in to Scrum, right? We're having our daily stand-up and teams are calling in. This is going beyond that. We're talking about holding a Scrum in a way that allows the teams themselves to coordinate the entire organization to realign. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We need to establish cadence. The idea that teams need to start their sprints on the same date and end them on the same date is an important one, including the synchronization of that. The cadence is the fact that I know when things are happening already. We need to establish product backlog refinement ahead of time so that you're not necessarily coming in while I'm having a webinar or a meeting and we need to do an urgent refinement. Things need to be scheduled more. We need to be more methodical about our events and about our processes in an agile implementation that is distributed. Responding fast to roadblocks. This is one that we tend to miss. The idea that our teams are out there and they're working, that's great. But how are they escalating these impediments? How are they escalating the problems they're facing in a way that we can react to them fast, in a way that we can react to them within 24 hours? Holding the backlog refinement on a periodic basis, I touched on that. This is where product backlog refinement in the past had not been an event. In a distributed environment, I propose that it needs to be a necessary event that is scheduled, and that this happens at least once a week. I recommend having them twice a week. Okay. This is where the product owner is coming in with the team to get their additional help in terms of refining what has already been put into the product backlog as far as requirements. Okay. And then we have a revised working agreement. The rules have changed. I agreed to work in a certain manner when we were in the office, but now that I am at home, we have different needs. How do we communicate? Is it okay for you to call me on my mobile at any time? It might be, it might not. Let's have those agreements. How do how do we work together effectively as a team in a way that allows everyone to have their concerns expressed and agreed to, right? And then the common elements, the common tools that we use at a team level need to be more organized, need to be at an organizational level. We need to have a common definition of done. We need to kind of have a common definition of ready. In the past, that's been somewhat suggested. In a distributed environment, having a agreement that says, hey, these particular product requirements are ready for development. What does that mean? That we can now take them in as a team. Let's agree on that. What are the elements that we're going to include in there so that we can together say, hey, when this is ready, we know what it means. Whether it's on the input, meaning the definition of ready for requirement to be taken on, or whether it's an output, whether a requirement has been created and is now done through the definition of done, right? From the trust and belonging perspective, having common sprint goals is a missed opportunity that I see over and over and over. The sprint goal is one of those purpose drivers. It's one of those things that gets us up in the morning because we're going to accomplish something in a short period of time. And teams continue to miss the opportunity to put that in front of their screens and begin working together in a cohesive manner. So creating a common sprint goal in every sprint is a very, very successful technique to drive belonging, to drive trust, to drive a common vision. The psychological safety of failing takes on a whole new meaning in a distributed environment. The idea why safe to fail has been a long staple of Agile is because if I make a mistake and I am penalized for it and I am drilled for it, the natural behavior is that I am going to try to push that blame, or worse, I'm going to hide that which happened so that I am not skewed. In an environment that encourages me to fail fast, fast being the keyword so it doesn't drag, it allows me to come forward and say, hey, I really messed up this last push. It's actually, I think, going to break a lot of things. Can you help me so that we can fix this right away? If I'm home and you're home, it's a lot easier for me to hide if I feel unsafe about admitting that. So encouraging the psychological safety is a key element of making this work. We want to foster self-organization. What does that mean? We talk about self-organization all the time in Agile. Well, this is about it being a pull system, not a push system. So I don't say, hey, Kim, here are 20 product backlog items. Can you finish these by Friday? And Kim is a great employee. She's a great team member. She's going to say, sure, Ernesto, I'll do this. And Kim stays up all night doing this stuff, and eventually she burns out, right? Instead, we put that up on a screen in a shared environment. We have our collaboration as a team, and we ask the team members to pull those in. So this is where tooling becomes an essential part, and we're going to cover a little bit on that. In fact, Kim will cover some of that later. When we talk about shifting to an outcome-based mindset, the idea that I'm seeing everyone working now because they're busy, well, that's always been a miss by any organization, but now it's nearly impossible. Some organizations are starting to monitor their employees through their application usage. Very, very easy way to create a distrust environment. And for you to tell me that you don't trust me, and what does that do to my morale? Instead, we need to start monitoring the output, the outcome, the product increment, that thing which we're delivering every so often, every 2 weeks. If you're practicing Scrum, most of the industry today, about 65% of the industry is on a 2-week cadence. And then allowing social time. Here's a little tool of the trade, a little trick, and that is open your meetings early. So if you're having a daily stand-up, up and down 5 minutes early every day to allow teams to just simply talk. There's no activity, there's no necessarily no agenda during that time. If you're having a sprint review, let's allocate 10 minutes to social time. There's another one, and that is a persistent room. What is that? Well, that's a Zoom room or GoToMeeting room, depending on what you use, that is always open. I've used this, and it's incredible how well it works to bridge the distance. This is the idea that there's an open room, and I'm alone, right? But if I join this room and now I'm coding with someone else in the room and we're just talking, the synergy that we create, it simulates some of the physical co-location benefits that we had. So think about, as a quick technique, keeping several Zoom rooms for the different teams where they just go in and start collaborating on a whim. And then the use of video, So we have picked a few things that are tool-based. Let's talk about video and what it means in this case, okay? When we talk about video, we all know that using video is beneficial. We're using them right now. You see myself, you see Kim. Why do we do that? Well, studies have shown that the amount of effectiveness that we drive from our discussions significantly increases over time as we share more and more videos. The idea that at first is a little stressful or a little uncomfortable, and then that evens out, so it's no longer uncomfortable and feels natural, and the idea that we focus significantly more when there's video. If these figures aren't enough, what's interesting about this study are some of the other aspects that it measured. You see how the richness in communication is increased through the roof from the original baseline to when the study captured the results. Now, the understanding of what is being communicated is a lot larger. And here's the golden one that we've been talking about before, and that is how trust increases just by the fact that I'm showing my face and you're getting my verbal and physical cues. So use video, use video, use video. We know you know that. This is about putting the numbers behind that recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Tapping into intrinsic motivators. Hopefully many of you have heard of Daniel Pink and his famous book, Drive. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It is a great book that talks about what motivates knowledge workers. And there are three factors that are of most importance, and that is purpose, mastery, and autonomy. The good news is that in a framework like Scrum, or Scrum of Scrums, as we're going to see in a bit, which is implemented by Scrum at Scale, you have the goal in the form of the vision and in the sprint goal. That's already cooked in. So make sure that you're practicing and that your teams know what your sprint goals are, but also what is your product vision? How often do we cast that, right? The idea of mastery, the continuous pursuit of excellence, the improvement, the Kaizen. This is one of the events in Scrum that is most underutilized, in my opinion. As we go into organizations and we meet with clients, the retrospective is one of the areas where we can make a significant impact because it identifies what pain point the teams are having and what we can do to work together and improve it. So there are techniques for holding retrospective in a distributed environment that make it rich, that make it engagement, that allow the teams to look forward to having this event.
Hey, Ernesto,
Yeah.
quick question. Do you know what the source is for the research on video usage?
Yes. So this microscopic thing here is one. This is actually by Olsen Apun. I will share that in the chat so that folks have it as a text instead of having to squint their eyes. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure thing. I don't think I can do that while I'm in presentation mode, so I'll do it anyway.
I can share it. I'll share it.
Great. Thank you, Kim. And the last part of this is the trust factor, the autonomy, the idea that teams are self-organized, that it's a pull system, that we observe a product backlog and sprint backlog as a mechanism for the teams to pull what they need us to create, not for us to push on them. And we use several tools in order to do this that are on the digital side that many of you already are familiar with, and the techniques in that. How do we use our Jira? How do we use our AHA in order to allow us to have a self-organizing aspect that takes out the push factor and that the teams become more self-organizing? We're not going to be able to look over our teams members anymore, so we need to get that and we need to move into allowing them to be proactive, right? A couple of more numbers, and this one is actually from a Gallup research on American workforce that shows how engaged team members outperform teams by 22%. This idea of happiness and engagement is not a fluffy thing. This is real. This is a quantifiable revenue and margin improver. Those team members are 3.5 times more likely to contribute at their fullest when they're engaged. And when their managers and coworkers check in with them on a regular basis, not only at the business level, but also at the emotional and personal level, that engagement goes up. This is where your one-on-ones and how you maintain those are important, but also how things like the retrospective and the scale daily scrum are carried out.
And I think is what's critical, and as we go into the next slides here, is, you know, when we talk about Agile, we are obviously talking about software delivery, but this is a great time to figure out how you can apply this to the rest of your organization, maybe to the C-level suite that actually doesn't do these processes. If you're, you know, trying to cut costs, you know, put them on a backlog and get these efficiencies in there. So there's a lot of these concepts can be applied to whether you're delivering software or whether you're just trying to run a business.
Thank you, Kim. It does have a higher application that goes beyond the individual team software development. This is really about how do we motivate our staff. Right? The happiness metrics, you see the numbers here. These aren't just because they're nice to have. These are actual quantifiable benefits that you can be getting today. Here's a technique that works very, very well in this environment. It is a daily Scrum of Scrums. It is the Scale Daily Scrum. This SDS stands for Scale Daily Scrum. It's simply a technique where, hey, you're already having your daily stand-up. You're having your 15 minutes. You're covering what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, and do you have any impediments? Now let's do that at the team level. With each representatives from the team come to the table, and they are able to do the same in a team of teams. And this pattern can repeat, where the individuals are able to replan every day at the team level. Here we have 5 teams coordinating their work together. They are surfacing their problems, and they're sharing their learning. And what this does, this study actually shows from Saab Aeronautics, by the way, this pattern can repeat itself over and over, where you begin to have this idea of scrum, and scrum, scrums. It depends how many times you can say that fast. And if you bring that to the real world in a practical sense, you have a company like Saab that implemented this, and in a matter of less than an hour and a half, they were able to synchronize over 2,500 people in their organization daily, every single day. That's phenomenal. This has been seen over and over in other organizations. 3M did something very similar. And when you look at this, the teams start with their individual daily scrums, and then they go into their other pods as representation. And in the end, it ends at the executive level. So if the organization has a true buy-in to this transformation where they're looking to thrive, the executives are able to receive this data, help with the impediment remover in less than 24 hours. Another big challenge is time zone. Almost always, whenever I have these discussions, the question of time zone comes up. Well, it turns out that the Scrum of Scrums is a great tool for allowing us to bridge our time zones. If you look at individuals waking up in California at 7:30 a.m., it is impossible for them to collaborate with team members in New Zealand when we span the globe with maximum potential time zone differences. This individual, somebody here is taking a hit. Someone's either waking up really early or someone's going to bed really late. So instead, we allow the regions to synchronize through their Scrum of Scrum network. We allow the other regions to do the same, and then we have a region that is in neutral zone. So we have the Asia Pacific areas having their meetings during their earlier times. We have the US and Europe having their meetings during the earlier time, and then we're meeting somewhere in the middle here. And this is allowing the individuals to now have collaboration during reasonable hours in a time when we're getting the true collaboration. Right? So Scrum of Scrum, and by the way, you can break this up into multiple Scrum of Scrums, and you get the idea. This depends on your fingerprint on that organizational structure that I talked about before. Another case study, this is one that I implemented, allows you to use Scrum of Scrum to simply span the globe in a way that has stakeholders all the way from California time to India in the manner that I just described, right? And this, by the way, has multiple variations of hybrid and co-location working together. Right? So I said a lot there. I want to pause for a second in case there are any questions, and also pass it back to Kim for some PI planning material that she's going to share with us.
We're all good for now. To you, Kim.
All right.
Great, thank you for that, Ernesto. So what we have here is tools and work. So there's a project that I've been working on personally for the last couple of years called Mojaloop. It's an open payment switch dedicated for third-party countries. And for the last 2 years, this was sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We meet in person every 3 months to do PI planning, program increment planning. And we do that with about 80 people in the room. And we have sticky paper on the wall. Everybody has sticky notes, and we tack everything up, and we get huddle around the board. And that's been very effective for the last couple of years until we couldn't get together anymore. So last month, we're like, how do we do this remotely? And we worked with several clients now to implement this. It's called a Miro board, M-I-R-O. And I have a slide at the end that has links to this one. And it's a remote collaboration virtual board where you can kind of see it. This is real folks writing real sticky notes of what they're going to do for the next 12 weeks. And we also not only had a better participation because we had a lot more people attending this time because people didn't have to travel. People remotely that couldn't travel before could actually attend. So the participation was actually went up, which was great. We had 6 Scrum teams, and the way we organized this, we had one big webinar where we brought everybody together. We talked about the topics, future plans, people presented kind of the work they did for the last sprints. And then what we did is we had separate Zoom meetings. So depending on which Scrum team you were in, you join the separate Zoom meeting for planning, and everybody works on this one Miro board. So you can actually see people putting sticky notes up, which is great. So people can mark dependencies. We can have chats going, for the different Scrum teams. So we can find out when dependencies will be done so other work can be completed. And we did everything from having confidence votes to PI objectives. And actually, the interesting thing about it, people actually like this format better. I know for me, being kind of a release trained engineer, it was a lot easier to say this as a PDF versus looking at all these handwritten, not very well written sticky notes in the past, where you had to figure out and interpret people's chicken scratch. Everything is right clear. So it's made it a lot easier. So we're now thinking about, even if we do go back to the in-person, how we can implement this tool because it's more effective. It lasts a lot longer, it's easier to see, and we'll still use that in-person meeting, but we'll use the Miro board to actually make our sessions better in the future and bring in people that couldn't participate in the past. So this was actually a great learning lesson for us on how we can actually thrive and do better at these meetings, even though we've been doing it for 2 years and we thought we were doing pretty awesome, but it turns out we can actually get better. So that's the planning board. And again, we'll have a tools slide that tells you the links to all these things as well.
Yeah, and what was fascinating to me about this, Kim, was also how your number of attendees went up when you started having them remote. So
exactly, yeah, perfect. It went up by, for the sessions, again, we didn't do the planning to the end of the week, but for the actual sessions and report outs, again, our highest event was 125 people. And we have these in Africa, so Johannesburg, Tanzania, so Kenya, so not all people can travel. We had a total of 225 unique users during that 5 days. So that was a huge increase. So again, let's figure out how we can get more people involved by balancing out, even if we do return to in-person, that remote collaboration work. So this next slide is just kind of giving you a sample of, some of the services we offer. So like I said in the beginning, certainly after this, reach out to us. We can have a 3-hour consulting service to get to know your business, but there's certain things to do. This doesn't have to be a heavy engagement. We can help you out in a pretty short time frame. So like, for example, we can do a 3-hour session where we can meet remotely with your team and walk through a series of questions. The teams rate themselves and we develop a baseline. And that baseline can be used to figure out where are those gaps, where are those opportunities in the organization. And it's simple things like we ask them how well they do retrospectives. And what we mean by that, and we explain that in the questions before they self-evaluate themselves, is, do they do it 1, very poorly, not at all? 3, well, we do it sometimes, but we're really not taking learnings and putting it in the next sprint to work on. Or 5, we do it every week, we have fun doing it, we're very critical of ourselves, and we take those lessons, those learnings, those what to improve things, and we actually put it in our backlog and work on those. So we're continuing to iterate and have that constant improvement. So out of these baselines, we generate that heat map. And that heat map is shown there, has several different purposes. Sometimes we run it for several different Scrum teams. So we'll balance one team versus another team, and we can see the deltas between the team. And why is this team doing so much better at PI planning or sprint planning, and this team isn't? What can we learn? Maybe we take one Scrum team member from one team and move them over to the other team to help enforce those best practices. It also provides us with deltas, right? So sometimes we'll run this baseline with management versus employees, ICs. ICs might think they're doing an awesome job at their CI/CD practices. Management, maybe not. Maybe they're not getting visibility. They think deployment and quality are issues. So again, it provides us with having better relations, better understanding of those gaps between team members, and it improves that trust level. That's kind of some of those examples there.
Hey, Kim,
Yeah.
do you find that you have any issues scaling Miro with a large number of concurrent people?
Miro, actually, no. It was quite exciting. And I know that Ernesto's used it too for quite a amount of people. So we had really just the facilitators were the ones in the boards, just because you don't want a million people, but we had probably 12 of us in the board at any given time. And you can see people moving around the sticky notes and stuff like that. The thing is that it does take a little bit to set up the board. And Ernesto's an expert, I'm now an expert, but there's some tips and tricks like locking the board, making a backup copy of the board that really helped to make sure it went effectively and efficiently. And then doing a little training session for the facilitators just to get them oriented as well, and that helped out too. I don't know if Ernesto, if you had anything for that.
Yeah, I agree. I'd never had a problem with its performance. And the feature of being able to track the cursor of everyone so that you know where they're working is very useful. It's worth mentioning that there are other tools like it. Miro is the one that we tend to gravitate because of the richness in features, but there's Mural, not to be confused with Miro. And there's also Span. These are whiteboarding real-time type of tools that you can look into.
Yeah. Another tool we use quite often is a tool called Fun Retro, and that will be a link to. And we use that for retrospectives. We also use it during our organization and process assessments to do brainstorming sessions. So this is, what's working well, what's not working well, and we get great insights from the team, and we're able to easily aggregate those, combined cards or sticky notes, and actually vote on them and sort on that voting. So it's a really efficient tool as well that we use quite often. And again, a lot of these tools have free licenses, but if you end up buying them for your organization, there's certainly enterprise licenses as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that little dive into tools.
Yeah, cool. So this just is a slide I like to show, and it provides you with a standard approach for implementing these initiatives. And again, we're talking about Agile here, and talking about development of those principles, but you can apply it in any way. So the focus is to figure out how do you close that gap in an iterative way. So it could be, that development gap, that trust gap, what have you. But the point is, is that you're identifying that, whatever you want to fix, putting it on your roadmap, right? Baselining it and seeing how you produce results. And if it fails, fail fast. And that's okay. We want to encourage failure, right? We want to fail fast, and that's fine. So that's why we do that baseline, because if we feel like we put something in, say we decided to do, scaled agile framework, well, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe we have to think about something different. Maybe we just do scrum of scrums or something like that. So you find the tools and processes that work for you and continue to iterate those until you get better and better on those. But you have to make sure you document them, put it on your roadmap, measure it, and then prove that it's actually working as well. So it's that continuous improvement. And again, like I keep saying, is that what you need to think about is how do you apply this to other aspects of your business? It's not just about the Scrum teams doing development. It's about now taking the management teams and figuring out how they are reducing costs, how they're optimizing productivity. Any type of effort you put in really has to be on that backlog. It has to be considered part of the work, and it has to be measured, baselined, and then seeing results. So you're looking for those results and driving value for whatever part of your company. It could be improving quality. It could be about delivering faster. Could be about reducing costs. But again, you can't quantify it if you don't measure it.
And to that point, Kim, it's worth mentioning, which you've already alluded to, that there are other implementations of Agile that go beyond software creation. There is now a significant movement toward Agile HR. There is Agile sales and marketing. There is Agile for hardware and manufacturing, and on and on and on. Taking these because it's a method of working efficiently and applying them to other aspects of the business.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of, really what's next? So, obviously, thank you so much for, participating in this webinar. We're getting close to the hour. This has been, helpful for us to kind of share our knowledge and the learnings, but we'd love to get to know you better. Please go ahead and reach out to us and schedule a consultant engagement. So it's an hour of your time. We can learn more about it and figure out how to help you. And then, of course, we want to make sure that even if you don't reach out to us, you're baselining where you are today, right? You're making strategic adjustments, right, to figure out how you can actually improve. You're keeping your teams engaged. You're using those tips and tricks that Ernesto gave you to build that trust. Show your video camera. Believe me, it gets easier after everybody does it. And the person that doesn't show it really is missed out, And I know when I show it, I'm much more focused, right? I'm not here doing something else or reading emails, right? It's accountability, but it gets a lot easier. And it's fun to see your colleagues. So do that. So keep teams engaged and then communicate. You got to communicate more often in these days. Reach out, especially if you're a manager, have one-on-ones, touch points, office hours. You might have your, one of those virtual rooms set up and just drop by office hours and have people talk about whatever. And then maximize our remote collaboration and seeing, even if we do go back to more normal, we do go back to the office, what are those things we learned that made us even better in this remote world? What are those things I can now take back and still do, right? And then measure, pivot, increase productivity. So again, it's all about measuring that baseline, improving incrementally, failing fast, and increasing productivity. So those are kind of our parting words. I just have one other slide and we'll take some questions just to flash up to you the tools that we were mentioning. And again, you'll have these at your disposal as well. So please go ahead and, we'll actually add the links too, so you have those as well, but you can search on any of these tools. So with that,
Perfect.
Any questions?
Yes, thank you, Kim and Ernesto, for the great presentation. Adjusting to these virtual teams is a little bit tricky, and I really appreciate especially all the tools that you've provided to us here today. So yeah, we've had a couple questions come in. So who runs the Scrum of Scrums, and how do we get that started?
Sure, I can take that one.
Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, so the Scrum of Scrum is made up, it's actually a team of teams. It's not an event. The Scaled Daily Scrum is the event where they meet. So the expectations are that there are representatives from each of the Scrum teams coming to this new team that is formed. And that's usually facilitated by one of the Scrum Masters from the previous teams, or in organizations like Saab, there's a dedicated individual. How you set that up is simply agreeing to meet 15 minutes right after the daily scrum. You create an organization schedule that says, hey, these are the times in which we are going to meet, and it's important that everyone follows that. And it's usually led by the scrum masters of the organization.
And if you don't have scrum masters, it can be someone else. The other thing too, if you're struggling with this is an area we can help with, right? Either myself or Ernesto, other folks on the team that have done this for a living for many years can kind of sit in the background on your first one and see how it goes. And then maybe next time we'll facilitate it. And the third time, again, be that silent partner. But again, our goal is to pass those skills back onto you, because when we leave, we want the teams to continue the best practices.
Perfect. Another question. I know we're coming towards the end of the hour, but what service do you have to help remote PI planning? That for
Again,
this session.
I mean, again, we can either help actually run the PI planning for you, and we've done that in many times. But our goal is to get you proficient enough to do that. But just like we did with showed you the mirror board, we'd have some pre-sessions with some of the product owners, gathering epics and stories for the next 12 weeks, because I think having that prepped plan and coaching for the POs or the product managers is critical. And then when teams get together, we have to facilitate, the people writing the stories and figuring out the objectives. But again, we can guide you through that, and depending on your knowledge of SAFe or program increment planning, we can scale it down or up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for joining today's call. I really hope you found this information really helpful to guide your organization as we deal with these new challenges. Just a reminder that a recorded version of this webinar will be available. I'll be sending that out via email, along with a PDF of today's presentation, as well as those links that Kim was talking about, so you can get a jump start on some of those tools. Distributed Agile development is just really one tool in that toolkit needed to help pivot to these new realities that we're all facing. As Kim talked about, we are offering a free consultation for anyone that would like to sit down with us, a little quick one-on-one hour to go through the situations you're facing, and we can give some key observations. More than happy to look at it across your org, see where some of those bigger opportunities are, and just really help your team deliver, collaborate, and develop effectively. So don't stop here. Please reach out and I can help coordinate that session. My email is on the screen, but you can also reach me at just victorias@crosslaketech.com, or just simply reply to some of the webinar reminder emails. We are also offering a wealth of additional resources. Our next webinar is helping you to transform and revolutionize your AWS cloud spend with costing out, cost optimizing. You can easily sign up at crosslaketech.com/resources. I hope to see you on our next webinar. And if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Have a great day, and thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you, Victoria.